Trinidad and Tobago and the World Wide Web. We have been here for 20 years. We have had 4 presidents come into our program. We had Dr. Gardner. We had here with us also Dr. Lashley. We had with us also Dr. Clinton Valley. And this morning, I have another privilege this morning to introduce you to our new president, Dr. Colwick Wilson. And Dr. Wilson, good morning, my brother.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Good morning.
All right.
How are you doing?
Great, man. And you are on the #1 program in the country. So I am glad you are here, that we can say, you can tell us exactly why USC exists, where USC is and why it exists.
Well, thank you, Pastor Brown. I am excited to be on the #1 program in Trinidad and Tobago, and looking forward to interacting with your station some more over time.
Yes.
But why is it that USC is a special place in the Valley? USC is a special place in the Valley because it offers a unique set of values that add to what we give.
Which valley, Dr. Wilson? Which valley?
It's a valley in Maracas.
Okay.
You know, I'm new to Trinidad, but I can tell you that it is in Maracas.
Okay.
And if you're in Trinidad, you don't know about Maracas, well, then I'm happy to tell you about Maracas Valley. It's a verdant, luscious. It's a place to be. It's a secret place in Trinidad. Everybody should live, but don't rush up too quickly because then that will kind of change the topography here in the valley. But yes, in Maracas Valley, sir, Maracas Valley. And what happens here in Maracas Valley, we have close to 3,000 students, just about 2,008-9 students here at the University of the Southern Caribbean. We have 6 extension campuses. We have over 30,000 graduates. We have over 40 different programs here in the Valley. And it's amazing how in the Valley, we are able to provide a unique set of education. And here's what's unique about it. We believe in the value of learning, but we also believe that there is an element to learning that is often discounted in the academy. And that is the spiritual ethos of our lives. And the longer we live, the more we confront times like COVID and all the challenges we face, we recognize that the spiritual aspect of our lives is critical element in helping us to cope well. So that's what we offer here in the Valley. We offer an education that seeks to transform ordinary men and women into extraordinary servants of God and in service to our fellow men and women.
Thank you very much, sir. I understand with you this morning, we have Dr. Susan Chan, who is head of the research. Dr. Chan, you have been on this program a couple of times. I'd like you to come in now and tell us something before we get to the main feature of our program. Dr. Chan?
Thank you, Pastor Brown. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. It's my happy privilege to be connected with you again. It's been a while since I came on this platform.
The last time I checked, Dr. Chan, they had 79 persons in India listening to the program.
Wow.
Yes. So don't just to Trinidad and Tobago, you can tell your countrymen hello also. Okay.
Yes, so greetings to people who have joined from our great country of India. And I believe they have joined from Pakistan, Middle East, US, Caribbean, across the world. So I bring greetings to you. In the name of our Savior, Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So yes, we are here to say and share with you a few things, a lot of things that's happening at the Valley, Maracas Valley, which Dr. Wilson has so nicely described at the University of the Southern Caribbean. And we have upcoming events. And at University of the Southern Caribbean, we are engaged in a lot of research, scholarly work, starting from the undergraduate level, going up to the graduate level. And so we have certain days in the year annually that we showcase the scholarly work of our students at the undergraduate and the graduate level and the faculty and staff. So the week is devoted for that. And we'll be talking more about that, Pastor Brown. So over to you.
Okay. Those who are listening to me this morning, I want to introduce a very dynamic individual by the name of Dr. Wayne Greaves. Now, Dr. Greaves is a distinguished scientist in the Infectious Disease Division at Merck Research Lab, USA. I think it's Merck they pronounce it. His lecture is entitled as COVID-19 Hope Amidst Despair, Distrust and Disparity. Now, Dr. Greaves will not go into the entire thing this morning, but we'll discuss a lot of things around that. But you have to get up there into the Marcus Valley, as Dr. Wilson said, and for that week, that you hear more of it as we come to the end of the program. Now, Dr. Greaves is a recipient of the US President's Award for his contribution to AIDS research. He is one of the brains behind the first 3-in-1 HIV/AIDS pill that has been approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration. In his current role as a distinguished scientist at Merck Research Laboratories in Rahway, New Jersey, his focus is on developing better treatment options for patients with multi-drug resistance HIV. He's also monitoring the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic and spent considerable time speaking to faith communities and ethnic minorities about the separating facts from fiction and conspiracy theories. Before I get more into you, Dr. Greaves, I want you to come in now and tell us something in this beautiful land that you are speaking into.
Well, thank you so much, Pastor Brown, for introducing me. I feel honored to be asked to participate in this program. My work is heavily into research, but I also find time to speak to other communities to translate what we do in research so it's simple for the average person to understand, because without that understanding, then we can't benefit from what we do in science. And I just want to say that there are so many theories and there's so much misinformation around, it becomes very important to rely on people whom you trust with experience in the field to be able to set things straight. And I also, in saying a few words, I also want to salute the USC president and faculty and their team for what they're doing to help to promote this important institution in Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the Caribbean, and also for pushing ahead so that they can really participate in some of the academic rigor that universities are expected to participate in.
Okay, I want to thank you immensely, Wadoran. I wanted to thank you, but I want to start immediately, because when you use the word research, we live in a time when people keep saying, I did my research, and I did my research, but yet they are doing research and they are coming away with this erroneous idea as for HIV and also for COVID-19. When you say research, what do you mean?
Yeah, so there are many kinds of research, and there's clinical research, there's basic research in a laboratory, there's epidemiologic research, there's research in public health, and many other fields, sociology, engineering, whatever. But when people talk about they did their research, I think what they're doing, what they're meaning is that they're saying that they looked on Google or Facebook or WhatsApp, rather than going to medical journals to look for trusted scientific articles. And what we've seen in this COVID-19 pandemic is that there are so many people that have suddenly become experts, but experts based on what? Experts based on things being spouted on Facebook and YouTube and wherever else in social media. Now, if you're going to follow anything on social media, you need to be looking at trusted sources, like, for example, the WHO, the Centers for Disease Control, universities that do research. I mean, those are the kinds of sources that you want to rely on, not just someone who suddenly goes and reads books or reads articles and suddenly pronounces themselves as an expert. That's not what you want.
Okay, I'm thankful for that, because I find myself in these researchers battle all the time with these folks who are doing the research. I want to ask something. Sometimes in reading your profile there, I came across this AIDS and HIV resistant. Do we have that?
Yeah.
I know the issue of HIV seemed to be settling, so I didn't think we were still having.
Yeah. HIV has not gone away. It's just that we've got better medicines to control it. And so now people can live a long, long time. You know, you may have heard of Magic Johnson, very famous basketball player. I mean, he's been infected, more than a decade ago, and he's doing very well because of the scientific advances we've made and the medicines that we have. So yes, but there are some people who have become resistant to the medicines that we have. And this is why we need to keep developing more. So part of my work has been coming up with newer and even newer drugs to mix with others in the cocktail that we use that will still work in those who become resistant to some of the drugs that we've been using for a long time. There are not a lot of people in that category, but there are enough that it makes it necessary and important to be able to help those people to have options for them.
When you say HIV has not gone away, but there was a time when the numbers were very large. Are we seeing now a decrease in the numbers?
Yes, certainly. We're definitely seeing a decrease, but many had hoped that it would have gone away. But since most of the transmission of this disease depends upon human behavior is a very difficult thing to manage. And so the best we can do is to control it, just that we control hypertension. Diabetes hasn't gone away, but we've got better control. So in some parts of the world is better controlled than in others. And in places where people have used medicines and not used them appropriately, just like antibiotics, you don't use them appropriately or you abuse them, then resistance can develop because the viruses are smart, just like bacteria are smart. So it's still around.
Okay, let's get back to COVID-19. Give us a primitive description.
But so COVID-19 is a disease that is caused by a virus we refer to as SARS coronavirus 2. There are a number of these viruses that cause severe acute respiratory syndrome. That's what SARS and SARS stands for. The coronavirus is a family of viruses. Now, there are 4 of them that cause this severe acute respiratory syndrome. And going back to Toronto back in 2003, that was where we saw the first one. Then we've had others come along, and now we've got this one that's causing us some trouble. There are also some viruses that cause, some of the coronaviruses that cause a cold, actually. And, you get colds, you go again, you don't become immune when you have these viral infections typically. So in the original outbreak back in 2003, it caused a lot of disease, but was circumscribed. It didn't spread like this current coronavirus, SARS coronavirus 2 is spreading. The big problem with this one is that not only is it a lot more efficient in terms of how it's spread, it is mutated a bit. And we've got many different variants or variations of the virus. And even though we may have got some little protection against the first one, it doesn't last for a long time. We know, for example, that if you're infected with the current coronavirus, after about 6 months or 8 months, you lose that protection or immunity. The same thing with a vaccine, which is why we've needed to give boosters. So it's an ongoing problem. And again, because of our behavior as human beings, it's taken much longer to control, but it's also somewhat unique, this virus. And it has really made us in medicine very humble, because when we think we understood it, it just surprised us and did something else. So I think it's going to be with us for a while, but worldwide, although there are pockets where it's still out of control, this particular strain or variant that we're seeing right now hasn't been as bad as it could have been. So there's some reason for hope.
What is the major cause of mutation?
Right. So viruses, that's what they do. They multiply and they divide. And as they multiply and they divide, the genetic processes are such that there are errors that are made as the virus multiplies. And so there are slight changes in the genetic makeup. And this just happens as a matter of chance. Some viruses make more errors when they divide in terms of repeating or replicating their genes. So some viruses develop a lot of mutations, like the HIV virus. They mutate so rapidly, it's very hard to think of a vaccine. Viruses like influenza virus also mutate, and every year or so, we have a slightly different vaccine. The SARS coronaviruses don't mutate that quickly, but they do mutate. And there have been several mutations that have occurred since this virus came onto the scene in 2019. But most mutations are not severe to cause any major change. There are few, but there have been many mutations that have occurred, but you're only hearing about the ones that are really serious concern, which we call variants of concern, like alpha, beta, and so on, delta, now Omicron. But that's what viruses do. They divide a lot, and as they divide, they make mistakes, and these are what we call mutations because it causes a change in the genetic composition of the virus.
In spite of these mutations, let's say I am Terrence Brown here, and I've decided that all I'm going to do is just attend to myself to a new start, nature. What are the chances? Let me put it this way. Would I be able to immune myself just by new start?
Right. No. I know people would like to think that because you live a healthy life, you exercise, you sleep, eat a plant-based diet, you get sunlight, you drink a lot of water, and so on, that you won't be affected. But I can point you to many people who've done all that and have developed COVID, they've developed other infections, pneumonia, they've died. I mean, viruses don't care. But I will say this, that by paying attention to a good lifestyle, you do put yourself in a better position for your immune system to be able to fight off viruses and any infection. But it is no guarantee that you won't succumb. The good news, though, is that if you are infected, the chances are increased. Your chances are better than if you weren't living a healthy lifestyle, that you'll be able to survive or not be as severely afflicted when you are infected. So there is value, but I don't want people to walk away with the impression that just because I do this, I can do whatever. There are many examples that I can point of pastors who, in my opinion, were arrogant and, who just felt they could do anything because God was going to protect them. They were being presumptuous. You can't go stand on a cliff and jump off and then say God will save you. So it's that same of attitude that some people have had, and they've paid the price.
So what exactly, if I have an immune system that was developed by the Creator, what exactly is the vaccine doing when I already have an immune system?
So what the vaccine does is that it tweaks the immune system. It tells the immune system to produce antibodies specifically in the event this virus comes along. The immune system is there, if you will, like an army ready to attack, but you have to tell it what is the enemy to attack. The vaccine primes the immune system so that the immune system cells are ready to go to battle if they see a particular enemy coming along. I think that's the best way I can explain it.
So therefore, you are saying that even if I have a sound immune system, I have been eating right, sleeping right, exercising right, doing everything right, the vaccine is still helpful for me.
Yes, because the vaccine points you in the direction where you need to go. Now, you need the immune system, because if your immune system is no good, the vaccine is also not going to be very good. Because basically, the vaccine efficacy depends upon having a good immune system. So people with poor immune systems don't benefit as much from the vaccine as those with good immune systems. So again, I go back to the point of having a good lifestyle and having a good immune system, because you're going to be better off by having a good immune system. Like I said, even if you're not vaccinated, your immune system is going to try to attack, but it may not be able to respond as quickly or as strongly as if you got the vaccine. You need both things. Basically what I'm saying, you need both things, the immune system to be good and the vaccine to get the most benefit. I'm not saying you can't, there are going to be people who don't get the vaccine and still get over COVID, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying if you want the best protection, the two together are better than either alone.
But how can I be sure? How can I be sure, Doc? I want you to be honest with me this morning. How can I be sure that this is not a sort of tracking device that has been placed in me? How in this world we have seen the Tuskegee experiment, we have seen the experiment in Japanese experiment. We have seen all these experiments. How can I not be sure that this is not another one?
Right. So since those awful episodes in history, like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where men were allowed, despite having penicillin, to just live with syphilis and suffer the consequences. And there are many atrocities of the world. Many steps have been put in place. You know, there's things like the Nuremberg decree. There are all kinds of, I don't want to say edicts, but steps that have been put in place now that to do research, it's tightly regulated. So we've benefited from those mistakes, so they shouldn't happen again because of the tightened rules. So I tell people that, yeah, these things happen, they were bad, but we can't live in the past. We should be vigilant, but we can't live in the past. We're moving forward. Those things now, there are steps in place that it shouldn't happen. Still, you have to be vigilant. But let's talk about what some people are saying on social media. Like, for example, there's a chip in the vaccine, so the vaccine manufacturers can track you or the government can track you. Look, if somebody wanted to track you, the easiest way to do it is probably your cell phone. You don't need to put anything in a vaccine. And most of us have cell phones and we can be tracked anywhere in the world through GPS. So you don't need to manufacture this silly idea about putting a chip in the vaccine, you know? And those kinds of theories about 5G, for example, you know, when other vaccines came along, the first SARS outbreak back in 2003, they were talking about the 3G network. Then it was a 4G. Now there's 5G. You know, it's almost impossible to keep up with the conspiracy theories that abound. But it would be very difficult in the tiny amount of liquid that you're being given in that vaccine to put anything like a microchip or any tracking device. Doesn't make any sense.
What are the mark of the beast? You have heard the mark of the beast?
Yeah, I mean, the mark of the beast is another popular theory, and really, it has nothing to do with vaccines, really. You know, that's a completely different theological construct. And in our particular denomination, we see it as different and referring more to papacy and Sunday worship and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have anything to do with a vaccine. So I wish that people would move away from this being a mark of the beast. And the sad thing, though, is that even within our own faith community, there are people who still choose to believe this. And it's just so sad that people have become so fixed in their thinking about what they believe that you really can't say much to change their ideas, you know? So I've moved now from being passionate, trying to convert people to my way of thinking, to say, look, all I can do, I'm going to share the information with you. You make up your mind. And you choose what you want to do. But a lot of the things that people are saying, I understand that not all people who are against vaccination are people who are anti-vaxxers and totally into conspiracy theories. There are people who are genuinely concerned about the vaccine safety and what it does. And those are the people that you can reason with and talk to. They may still not agree, but they're more reasonable. But then there are others who are waving signs, you know, shoot me, I don't care, I'll die, I'm not taking the vaccine, all this stuff. And it's kind of illogical. What can you do? You know, and this is not new. This has happened through history. I was looking at the smallpox vaccine era. There were people then who also didn't, you know, but thankfully smallpox has been eradicated through the use of vaccines, which were mandated in most of the world.
As I say that, I know my dad used to say, if you're wrong and sincere, you're still wrong.
That's right.
Yes. So, but
Sincerely wrong.
You're still wrong. So I want to ask you this. I know you are not a psychologist, you're not into psychology, but what do you give? What do you give? I know somebody may ask you that during research week. What do you really give as a reason, as an answer for this mass hesitancy that we are experiencing?
Yeah, so actually my undergrad was psychology.
Okay, all right. Excuse me.
But there's not one reason that you can give for this mass obsession with fake news and conspiracy theories. But what we know is this: the human mind is such that it does not like uncertainty. When we are faced with several choices, the mind has to make up its mind to make a choice. I can't believe 5 things. And people tend to go with the choice that is closest to their way of thinking. And their way of thinking may be simple. It may be too complicated to look at another method or explanation, especially if it's, complicated science and you're not a scientist. It's easier to believe what you believe. The trees are shedding their leaves, so it's going to rain. Whatever. So conspiracy theories, we now understand, play a very important role for many people. It provides a sense of certainty, a sense of surety, a sense of confidence. And when they are then exposed to information that contradicts that certainty that they have, they can't accept it because it would destroy their sense of security. And so it is a very difficult process of engineering change. And it takes a long time typically, and sometimes it never happens. So those are some of the reasons I would say for this distrust. But then, as we mentioned earlier, there are genuine examples in history where science and scientists and the government or governments did atrocious things. And those have created lasting memories for some people. And some people have not been able to let go of that and move beyond. And then there are those who genuinely want more information. They're not satisfied with the level of safety data that we have, despite it increasing all the time. But there are all those things I would say that factor into why people are reluctant to take the vaccine.
I as you said that, I remember something I told a guy. I said, during these past experiments that went so all right, the level of communication was not as high as it is now. Things can go on for 10, 15 years without people knowing back then. But now, because of the level of communication, things have changed. What we are dealing with is very intelligent, so-called intelligent people, academics and things like that. Even in our church, there are many pastors who see all these conspiracy theories as real. How do I strip someone from understanding what a conspiracy theory is and what the rational reality is?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. You're absolutely right. And it just reminds us that as human beings, we often don't act because of logic. We would like to think we do, or from reason. But many of us, even so-called intellectuals, are emotional creatures and react on the basis of emotion. I mean, how else can we explain even some physicians who are trained in medicine and in science espousing some of the nonsense that they do? It's so bad that medical boards in the United States are having to consider taking away the licenses from some physicians because of their misinformation. And there's one pharmacist I was reading about in Wisconsin destroyed a whole batch of vaccines. A pharmacist, someone who should know better, because he felt that it wasn't right. People shouldn't be vaccinated. There are other people who are on their deathbed, and we're telling them, look, you have pneumonia caused by COVID. And they're saying, no, this is not COVID pneumonia. I'm just having a regular pneumonia, because they can't bear to accept that this is the truth. I've had people right in my own church, right in my own little study group, who died, who refused to take the vaccine, so it doesn't matter to me from what we're seeing, whether you're a politician, we almost expect them to say some of these things, but a minister in our churches, educated people, and physicians. So like I said, it just emphasizes the fact that it's not intellect that drives our decision making as much as we would like to think. It is more emotion, sometimes ego, hubris, arrogance, all those things.
Do you think that this whole pandemic is impacting us as a people?
Well, the impact has been massive and continuing to be a real concern. I mean, let's talk first about mental health. I mean, they have been, and physical health, in the early stages, there were physicians, we didn't know what this was. They were just working. They weren't even wearing proper personal protective equipment or masks. Many, many physicians, nurses, and medical assistants died, you know, and for them, it's particularly painful to see how people are trying to minimize the impact of this. Not only that, consider this, some of those very healthcare workers, they were scrubbing up and scrubbing down. They go home, they take their clothes off at the door, they go have a shower before they even go to their families. That's how bad it was in the beginning. Not only that, the individuals who were infected with COVID. Most hospitals did not allow any visitors. So your husband or your wife, your sister, your brother, you admitted to the hospital, you're in isolation, you can't visit them. They are dying. They are dying alone because their family members can't come to them. There was one picture that showed one family coming to the window, there was a glass, putting their fingers up, and the person on the other side of the patient putting their fingers back just to touch, but no physical touch. That's how isolated, how lonely people were forced to become because of this. And so there's been a massive impact on mental health. We've seen an increase in divorces, increases in domestic abuse, crime has increased. So this has affected almost all walks of society, I would say, not just the physical health, but economic impact on many countries has been tremendous. And the mental health is a real concern, particularly for young people, as we're beginning to realize right now.
During Research Week, would you be covering, what is your main focus on Research Week before I come back to the next question?
So I want to give an update on where we are in this epidemic or pandemic, you know, the progress that has been made scientifically, but also the impact that this has had, like we just discussed, on people, on countries, on economies, not just the physical health, but the mental health, and to look a little bit at some of the inequities and inequalities that we've seen in terms of the countries that are richer gobbling up the majority of the vaccines. The promise of vaccines being more equitably distributed was a joke. The fact that some communities have not been properly cared for or looked after, people of color in the United States, for example, people who are homeless, but to also then leave with a sense of hope for the future, because we are learning more things and we're able to protect people better. We're even now able, for those who refuse the vaccine, to help them still be able to survive because of some of the medicines that are being developed. And at the same time, we're learning more about how we can help protect people from the ravages in terms of the mental health. We're learning about long COVID. These are people who have persistent symptoms and what we can do to help them. So that's the kind of trail I want to follow, you know, how it started a little bit, what's happened, and where I think we're going. Before the Omicron variant, we had the Delta variant, and that was pretty serious and caused quite a bit of disease. Then the Omicron variant came along and it had many, many mutations. So it was a very scary discovery because we felt that all these additional mutations, which I'll talk more about in my lecture, there was real concern that this is going to be big trouble. So when it was first reported in Southern Africa, actually the first patient I think was in Botswana, but the Southern African researchers, they were really on top of it. And it requires special tests, especially what we call genetic sequencing, to be able to identify these variants. So there was a real concern that this is massive. But then from the reports from our colleagues in South Africa, they were saying, but this is very strange. We aren't seeing as many deaths as we would have expected. It's not been as severe as we expected. And so maybe, although it has all these mutations, they aren't the kind of mutations that will cause trouble. And that we weren't sure. We kept our fingers crossed. Let's wait, let's wait, let's wait. It's still new. But as we waited, indeed, despite all the mutations in this Omicron variant, it has not turned out to be the dreaded and feared and severe disease, but it is a lot more infectious, so it spreads more quickly. So more people are more easily infected. And because of that, we've had to move to using better masks, not just a cloth mask. But we've been, I'd say, lucky or providential working that it's not worse, because we would have been in a serious situation. There will probably be more variants, and we're hoping that they won't be severe and they'll be just as mild. And this will at least give us some immunity for a little while to give us a chance to breathe.
The word mild is a tricky word. People are dying from Omicron?
Yes. Let me qualify that when I say mild. That is looking at the overall population. People who have chronic medical problems, people who are immunocompromised, and people who are old, typically those over 60, especially over 65, are still at great risk from Omicron. But the general population, if you look at 1,000 cases of the Delta variant, 1,000 of Omicron, in general, you'll see milder disease and fewer hospitalizations. But if you look at that subset of people who are older or have a chronic medical condition, they are still having severe disease, and many of them are still dying. Yeah. So you may not have all the laws that we may have, but there's some basic things that are implemented worldwide when it comes to research. I mean, it's a standard. There's what we call an International Committee on Harmonization that includes the Americas, it includes Asian countries, it includes Europe. So there's certain things that now can't happen if you're doing research. In fact, even to do research here at University of West Indies, for example, and at USC, there are what we call institutional review boards or ethics committees. And before any research can be done, this is a panel that is pretty much independent and chosen to include people from the community, typically someone who's also from the religious persuasion, but and in some places, an activist who is a member of the target group. But this committee and experts, of course, gets to review the research before it can be done. So there are some protections so that you just can't run off and do what you want, you know. And I think it's getting stricter and stricter in most countries around the world. I mean, there's still some, of course, where you still have to be vigilant. And even wherever you are, you still need to be vigilant as an individual. Before you can participate in research, typically you're given something called an informed consent form to read. And you're given a chance to review that with whomever you want, you know, somebody you respect who may understand it more than you. You have them review it before you sign off that you're going to participate in the research. So there's some safety valves, if you will, that exist now that didn't exist before. I'm not saying it's perfect, but there's definitely more protection. So I think the true scientists at the moment are being very cautious about what this means, because we know that this virus will continue to mutate, and the next set of mutations might lead to a virus that is quite different. We were, I think, rightly concerned because of the large number of mutations in this virus, but as we said earlier, not every mutation has a bad outcome, even with many. But I think we can't be cavalier and callous about it, because we're not done with the virus yet. We're hoping that it won't surprise us and be, you know, something more vicious and more virulent after this one. And so I think we're trying to be sanguine, we're trying to be hopeful, but we don't want to be dismissive either. And so what we're doing is that we're continuing to develop medicines that will be helpful, so that even if we have to deal with this in another format, we believe that it won't be able to wreak the kind of havoc that this was able to do, because we were literally unprepared. So I think that's the way I would approach it, rather than predicting whether or not we'll have the virus. You know, the influenza viruses are around, they haven't gone away, and we have to get vaccinated every year or thereabouts in the US. The second of these SARS viruses, which was called the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS virus, hasn't gone away. There's still a few cases that occur in the Middle East every year. You know, this could become a virus. Like I said, there are 4 viruses in the coronavirus family that are responsible for the common cold, and we get them over and over again. They're not very serious, but we get the infection. It could be that this happens with this coronavirus too, but we can't be sure. People think that we only started working on the coronaviruses after this was discovered in 2019. But as I said earlier, the first SARS coronavirus outbreak occurred in 2003. We're talking like 18, 19 years ago. Even then, scientists started working on it. They never got to test the vaccine because it didn't last that long as an epidemic, and it was very circumscribed. And also the technology with the mRNA, the messenger RNA that we now are using for these wasn't perfected. It was beginning, but it wasn't perfected. And so really, when people talk about quickly, they don't understand the science that was happening way back since 2003. That's one thing. The second point I make is that when we test vaccines, we're typically testing a couple 100,000. For these trials, we're talking 20, 40,000 people. And the only reason we were able to do that was because there was so much disease around. For most vaccine studies, you don't have that many people. So what I'm saying is that you are getting a lot more data. It didn't take us as long because there were so many cases. So people need to keep these things in perspective and not mix things up. So, the average person may not understand, but I think those of you who are willing to listen and understand step by step, you would appreciate that there was a lot of testing done. There were a lot of people who were tested, and this is why we could move forward when we did. And it was a trade-off in the end. Yeah, we could have waited 1 year rather than 6 months, but people were dying.
This morning, speaking to all who are listening, we had with us the president of the University of Southern Caribbean, Dr. Colwick Wilson. We also had with us the director of research at the university, Dr. Susan Chan, and the distinguished scholar, Wayne Greaves. And I really, really enjoyed, Dr. Greaves, I really enjoyed your presentation. I really, really enjoyed it. It was sound, it was very, it's like the Bible. They say anybody could read the Bible and be interesting. Whether you are highly qualified or not qualified at all, the word have that life in it that anybody reading the Bible will not be bored. You did that this morning. Anyone listening to you, Dr. Chan, you had something to say? I saw your hand was raised. Oh, anyone listening to you this morning could have understood exactly what you were saying. And it was a pleasure, and I cannot wait now for Research Week. So Dr. Greaves, thank you very much. May God keep you in good health and keep your foot firmly planted on the ground. Dr. Wilson, you have a big task ahead of you, but I know you are capable. So until Dr. Chan, God bless.